So welcome back aboard North Star of Herschel Island. We're sitting here today in North Star's pilot house or deck house and talk about a very, very important person in North Star's history, which was C.T. Pedersen, Christian Theodore Pedersen. This man was born in Norway in the 1870s and ended up coming out to Canada and then down to the United States and working on whaling ships. He worked up and down the coast and into the Canadian Arctic and had very many adventures up there. Many different organizations, many different businesses he ran, and he was bumping shoulders and taking on as passengers people such as Roald Amundsen and Bartlett of the Karluk, and he even delivered Wilmer Stephenson at the beginning of the Canadian Arctic expedition up to Herschel Island. He was described by Henry Larson of St. Roch as being the best ice pilot that ever lived, and Pedersen ended up forming a company that was based in Vancouver with a big warehouse up on Herschel Island, and that was called the Can-Alaska Company. Now Pedersen, after the whaling era, kept on going back up to the Arctic, and this time though he was aboard his big ship called Pedersen. This is a former geological survey ship, three-masted barkentine, and he would go up and stop in Alaska. And one of the things that he would do when he was trading for fur there was that he would get from them in return these muktuk, so whale blubber, and this was the whale muktuk of blue whale, which is apparently the creme de la creme of muktuk, and the indigenous people there would fill up emptied out seals that they called pokes, and they'd fill them up with blue whale muktuk and whale oil, and he could then go into the Canadian Arctic and trade with the Inuit there, because he knew, having spent so much time in the Arctic, he could speak Inuktitut. These people were his friends, he'd known them his whole life, and so he knew the specialty goods that they wanted. So Can-Alaska was in direct competition with the Hudson's Bay Company, but because Pedersen had these relationships, he also knew who he could trust, and in many cases he would just grub stake a trapper for all the supplies they would need to get through the winter, on the understanding that when the trapper came back in the spring, he would trade exclusively with Can-Alaska Company. One of the other things, the main things that for our story that Pedersen did, was that he used to bring up what they called schooners, Arctic schooners, and North Star is considered one of those, though very, very few of these were actually schooner rigged. But these were just work boats, sail cargo boats, and he would have them built down in California, and he'd put them back on his ship, Pedersen, and take them up to the Arctic. His first mate for many of these voyages was a guy named George Washington Porter, who was an indigenous, who was an Inuit fellow, and Porter ended up becoming the guide for St. Roch on her first attempt through the Northwest Passage. Another famous person for our story was a guy named Fritz Wolke, who was a German trapper and all about whaler, and he came on board as a mate for quite a long time, and Fritz Wolke ended up being the father of the co-owner of North Star, first Fred and then Jim Wolke. So many connections, such a spider web of connections with all of these famous Arctic people.